So I'm here in the shop today, gathering bits and pieces for a couple of builds that we're working on. And I stumbled across a Holley carburetor issue we've never done a video on, which seems impossible because we've done like over 100 videos on Holley carburetors and their idiosyncrasies and setup and tuning and troubleshooting. Here's one we haven't done yet. Okay, maybe we did it. We might have done this video in the past, but my brain is old and hammered. And this is such a common thing. And it applies to every single feed Holley 4-barrel carburetor out there. And there are millions of them. So here's the symptoms. You may or may not come across these, but here are the symptoms. Car drives down the road just perfect. And momentary full throttle operation like passing gear, no problem. Steps right to it. But when you're pouring on the beans, right, you're running up through the gears, you're going for like a quarter-mile run, it noses over, you've got a lean condition on, let's say, the second half of the track. It'll drive you out of your mind because it has nothing to do with the pump. It has nothing to do with the tank. It has nothing to do with the fuel lines. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. It has to do with a common manufacturing variance defect found in these carburetors. And when these variations are stacked, they basically choke off all the fuel to the secondary side of the carburetor. So now for you guys that aren't completely familiar, you're just learning this stuff. This is a single feed Holley 600 4-barrel carburetor. Probably the most common one out there. And this is a dual feed. So you see this one has two external fuel lines that feed the float balls. The situation we're talking about does not apply to these, only to these. So the way these carburetors work is here's your main fuel inlet, okay, so from the pump to here, and then the fuel is carried to the secondary side, the secondary float bowl, through this transfer tube. And it's a small diameter tube. That's about 1/4 inch. It's barely up to the task under the most perfect of circumstances. But generally speaking, they work. Okay. Now this tube is fed through a hole that's drilled through the float bowl body and intersects where the fitting, where the fuel line fitting goes in. So that's that little hole at the bottom there. And it's drilled always in the same place, no matter how many of these things I've checked. The hole is always drilled exactly in the same place. And it's drilled this way. And like I said, it intersects right inside there. So here's where the problem comes in. Not all bosses are cast to the same thickness. And not all fittings that Holley offers have the same reach. And so you could have a situation, actually it's a very common situation, where the fitting is blocking off a good portion of that hole that feeds the transfer tube. Now, the variations that you're going to come across, the inconsistencies based on production tolerances, machining tolerances on these carburetors is pretty mind-blowing because they're all over the map. Now, I grabbed these 4 float bowls off the shelf. These are the only 4 float bowls that I have loose. So it's not like I went hunting specifically to find variations in these bowl castings. These are just 4 random ones that I grabbed. And from the one with the longest boss for the inlet to the one with the shortest boss on the inlet is a difference of 80 thousandths of an inch. And all 4 of them are different. No 2 are exactly the same. This is common. This is not unusual. It's not like we found, oh, here are the defects. No, they just take 50 of them, measure 50 of them, and 40 of them are going to be different widths. I don't know what the blueprint number is for them, but that's besides the point. They're all a little bit different. This hole that the transfer tube fits into is always drilled in exactly the same place. As many of these as I've checked, I've found that these are all the same. But it's the distance here from where the hole, let's get this in there, from where the hole intersects the threads to the front face is where the difference is. So now, if we compare these, we've got 5 threads showing on this one, And we've got a distance of 3 threads showing on this one. So if you take this fitting and you screw it into this bowl, it's only going to partially block, just by a thread or two, that hole for the transfer tube. If I take this and screw it into this one, it's going to block more than half of that tube. And these things, like I said, they're undersized. The fuel supply for the secondary float bowl is undersized to begin with. So any restriction in that is going to really bite you in the ass when you push these things, especially when the clearances stack. Now, it's not just the bowls that are different. Here are 2 factory Holley fittings. This one here is banjo style, and this is just a regular, you know, like to screw a 3/8 fuel line into. Now, look at the difference in reach of the threads. Now, if you were to take this banjo fitting and screw it in here, well, you've got plenty of room. There's no restriction from the end of the fitting to the intersection for the transfer tube. But if you were to take this fitting and screw it into this one, you're going to block off more than half of the transfer tube opening. Crazy, right? So you've got variations in the depth that the fitting screws into in relation to the transfer tube feed hole, and you've got variations in how far the fittings will screw in. Now, stack those clearances, take the longest fitting and screw it into the shortest boss, and you've pretty much effectively blocked off any major fuel flow through the secondary side of the carburetor. So the bowl, under normal conditions, there'll be enough fuel there to fill the bowl, keep it happy. But now, when you're on it and fuel's being pulled into the engine, the fuel level drops. It can't replenish that fuel quickly enough through the blocked off hole because the threads are interfering. I've seen people throw the cannon, the parts cannon, trying to chase this problem because the fuel pump is weak, or it's not big enough, or it needs a second fuel pump, or the line is too small, or no, none of those things matter. All that matters is there has to be an unrestricted path from the fitting to the transfer tube. And with those production clearances or production differences in both the boss, the depth of the boss, and the reach of the fitting, you could have a situation where you've got that hole nearly all the way blocked off and you don't know it. So how do you fix this? What's the fix for this? Well, obviously, if you have a choice, you want to go with the boss that has the most, or the bowl, I should say, that has the longest boss. But if you're just dealing with what you have and you want to maximize it, you want to use as shallow a fitting as possible. Like I said, this banjo fitting, these are both factory fittings. Look at the difference in reach between the two. If you've got a fitting like this, you can, what I do with these, I put these on a bench grinder, and I'll just shorten them down to right about where, you see that recess is in there? So I'll take these down to approximately the same depth that this banjo fitting has. If you have a situation where, like on this one is really shallow. So if you've got a situation like this, you might want to index this fitting. So in other words, screw the fitting into the carburetor, make sure the washer is on there because these things have a washer, screw the finger all the way in, mark the very bottom of it, and then when you take it back out, put a little notch in the threads aligning with that mark. So this way you know that you've got just that little bit of extra clearance down into that feed hole. So shortening them up, indexing them, you can take a Dremel and extend this hole back a hair. You got to be very careful with it. You can't go too crazy. It's easy to slip and screw up the threads on these. They can booger up really easy. But you can take a Dremel and push this hole back a little bit. Now also, this is something I got to show you too. These holes don't always end up in the same place. Or I should say they're in the same place, but they're not always drilled to the same depth. So if you look at this one, look how far in the pick goes. Okay, And now let's take this and do this one. And that's a difference right there in depth between the two. So this one is not drilled as far in, so it's going to have less of a hole exposed to this cavity there. So that's another thing you might want to check into. You can drill those holes deeper, as far as you can go to where you're completely open, or that area is completely open. There's no one-size-fits-all fix for this. You've just got to look at what you have, what you're working with, and then play around with it and modify it so that restriction, there's no restriction between the fitting and the transfer tube feed hole. Say that 3 times fast. All right. I hope that fixed a problem that you may not even realize you have. You don't know it until you go to run the car all the way through, and it's like, you know, just where it starts to feel real good. You're really starting to cover ground, and it just noses over. That's why. I'll see you tomorrow.